welcome to episode 10 of our little Harbour Homewares shop project. Now in today's episode I want to fit the floor in, and I also want to do something with those stairs. Okay, let's get started. So I just want to start by showing you that tile flooring card that I ordered. So this is the lighter blue, the antique azure Mediterranean tile, and I also ordered the darker blue, which is just called blue Mediterranean tile, and I love them both, but I think I prefer the lighter blue, and I'm definitely going to use this in the entrance hall and in the landing, but I think it's a little bit too fussy to use on the floor in the shop areas. I think because they're larger area, it's just going to look a little bit too much with all of the furniture and all of the accessories and everything that we're going to have standing on the floor. But I really do love it for the entrance hall and the little landing area. And then what I'm actually going to do is do my stripwood flooring in the main shop areas on both the ground and the first floor, but I'm going to use the 0.8mm sheet wood. And I've found out everything that I've got actually in my stocks. I've got 6 sheets, which isn't going to be enough for both floors, but I'll be able to get the ground floor started, and then I'll order some more, and then we can do the first floor. But that will be 6 sheets, will be more than enough for that first floor. Let me get rid of those stairs for a moment, get those out of the way. I have to have a look at those in this episode as well. I'll just sort of lay those in there like that to give you a rough idea of how much would be needed. And these are the 100 by 300mm sheets. So 2.5 down that way, and then what, another sheet. So let's say 4 sheets would do it. But I'll let you know exactly how much I use as we go along, because we're cutting them in strips. We may need a little bit more than that. So we'll see how many that takes, but I will start by cutting a cardboard template as I normally do, and then we'll cut these into strips. So I'll just pop those back in there for now, and I actually want to start by cutting the card for these 2 areas here and getting that attached. So to cut the flooring card for the top landing, I measured the surface area and I've cut a piece of paper accordingly. But then when I've put it in, I've just gone a millimetre over. So I've just folded that down and I'll cut along there. And then I placed some wooden boards on top of the sort of stair opening like that. And then went underneath with my pencil and drew around the opening from here, and then moved the boards over and did the same thing again to get the cut going down there. And that's just because I didn't have a piece of board that was as wide, exactly as wide as the landing. If I take that out, bring the template out, you'll see on the underside there that I've got a place now to cut, and then I can use this as a template to cut my card. So let's do that now. Start by cutting out the stair area. A bit of a curve in that corner, and then I'll just trim off that front edge. That's just because I sort of measured from the back wall to the front wall, and the floor is actually sat back a little bit. So trim that off. I'm just going to try that in place once more before I cut into my card. So lay that back into place, and then I just need to cut a little bit more off of the opening along here. So I folded the template over. So just try it again and then get an exact cut. So fold it in there, and then I can just trim that again. And then I'm happy to go ahead and cut my card. So the card always has sort of a strip along the end with the details, so make sure that you're not cutting into that part. So I'm going to turn it over like that, and I know this is the end I want to cut from. So just have a think about how your template goes into place. Can't pick it up. So mine goes like that, so that strip is along the right hand side there. So I actually want to cut it the other way around. So I'm going to turn that over and go like that, so that I've got a nice neat edge. So I'm really sort of cutting it upside down, and then I'm just going to use a nice sharp pencil just to copy around the edge of that. And then I'll cut it again with my scissors. So let's go and try that into place. So yep, I'm happy with that. So I'll go ahead and cut the other one, and then I can glue those both into place. And because that was a nice oblong, I just actually put the measurements onto the back of the card and cut it straight out, and that's just slid in there nicely. And I really love how that looks. I love the colour with the colour of the walls. So I'm going to glue these into place now, so I shall just apply my Gorilla Wood glue to the wooden floor of the shop, and the same up the top there. And because I've got my masking tape there protecting the electrical wire, I can put glue all over and then stick the floor card into place. So that's those glued into place, and I just want to now try the stairs into place. So as I suspected, the stairs aren't now fitting back into place, and it's just a tiny fraction out, and that's the thickness of the lining paper that I've used and then the 2 coats of paint. So the lining paper and paint really does make a difference to things like this, so that's just made that a little bit too tight now to get those back in there, but it's not a problem because I can just sand a little bit off the end of this landing, and then the upper stairs, which I've got here, can just be positioned over a little bit, so that won't be a problem. So I'll just sand a little bit off of this end. So I started off sanding this using my 180 grade paper and just going along the sandpaper like that, but it was taking quite a bit of work, so I went down to Matt's garage and I pinched some 80 grade sanding discs, and that's really coarse, so that made the job a lot quicker, and that now fits nicely back into place. Like that. And it doesn't hold itself up, so I won't let go of it. It'll just clatter to the ground. But I'm going to move away from the stairs for the moment and make a start on the flooring for the ground floor. So I've started by making a template for the floor area, just using cereal packet card. And if you end up having to use 2 pieces, masking tape them together side by side rather than overlapping them, otherwise you'll end up with a big ridge down the centre of the floor there. And I've made this about 1 millimetre smaller than it needs to be all the way round, and that way you won't have trouble when you come to put the flooring back in. So I'm going to cut my sheets into 10 millimetre wide strips, and I'll probably just cut a couple of sheets at a time and then attach them to my template and then cut some more, because I don't want to cut all of them and then not end up using all of them. And the length of this piece of wood, which is about 300 millimetres or just over, will be the main length of my, of each strip. So I ended up cutting 3 sheets into strips in the end, which are there. And if I split the wood or anything like that, I just cut the split part away and kept the half strips, and then I can use those for the shorter strips once I start building up the floor. So I'm going to bring the template in now. Okay, so this is the front edge of the template, so along the front of the shop, and I'm going to actually start here so that we've got that nice clean edge along the front, and then if we have to sort of cut a half strip lengthways or part of a strip, then that's going to be hidden at the back underneath all our lovely shelving and pieces of furniture. So I'm just going to start by putting a little bit of glue along this front edge. My nozzle keeps getting bunged up. Hold on, let me just go and clear my nozzle. Right, try again. And you don't want to put too much on because then it will dry by the time you have worked your way back to that area. Actually, I'm going to use a scraper so that I don't have to go and wash out the brush in between spreading. So I'm just going back a couple of inches there, maybe a little bit more. So spread that nicely along. Can you see that bottom corner? Yeah. Up there. And then take my first full strip. I'm going to put that right along the edge of the template and try not to overlap it, because then you'll be taking away that little bit of give that we've got there. But obviously you want to cover the card. I'm going to take another full strip here and just place it along the edge of the card. I'm just leaving a tiny little gap between. I would normally with the thicker strips leave about 1 millimetre, but with this I just want a little hair gap. It's really just an indication that it's another piece of wood. I'm just making sure that I'm fully in the template there, and then you can just bring in your craft knife and snip that off again along the edge of the template. And because we're using the 0.8, it's so easy just to snip through like that, and then that piece becomes your first strip of the next row. And if you do overlap your template a little bit, don't worry, because we can turn it over once this is completely dried and just trim around the edge if we need to. But it's best to just try not to do it in the first place. It saves a little job. So press that down. And I'm going to bring in the next full one. And I'm going to use those part strips, but I want to keep this front area and the visible area nice and neat. Again, I'm laying them pretty close to the first lot of strips. Hope I'm not cutting through my tablecloth there. It doesn't really matter, it's old anyway. And then that little piece again becomes the first one there. And this just gives you that nice random effect, rather than just having them sort of laid out in strips, although that does look nice as well. I like doing this and then using the scribe to make little nail holes in the end of each strip, and it just adds a really nice detail. And although I've used 0.8 throughout, some of the pieces are slightly thicker than others, and I quite like that, because if I run my finger along there you can see it's a little bit higher than the one before, and that just adds to that nice random effect. So don't worry if some of your wood is slightly thicker, and that will happen just because all sort of wood has a bit of a tolerance, so you will find that sometimes they are slightly thicker. Some sheets are slightly thicker than others. So I've just got a little bit there. And I was going to go for one of those shorter ones, but I'll wait till we get further up before I use those, probably halfway up. And you can see now that my glue is starting to dry out by the time I've got to 4 strips. So you're probably better going for sort of 1.5 inches of glue. when you initially put the glue on. Because where it's drying, they're starting to sort of try and pop up. So I'll put a little bit more glue on, and then that one will become my next first strip. Where that one's trying to lift, I'll sort of put the glue under there when I spread it out. And we'll be weighing this down at the end, so it will dry all nice and flat. Weigh it down with some heavy books, or you might have proper weights or something you can use. I'm just putting a bit less glue on this time. And then continue until your sheet is filled, until your template is filled, completely covered. So that's as far as I got with those 3 sheets of wood. And I'm going to cut some more now, but I am actually going to weigh this down even though it's not finished, just because I don't want the pieces lifting up. And don't worry as well if your card is curling upwards, because it will, just because we're using the thinner wood. But when we come to stick that into the shop, we'll obviously stick it all flat, so don't worry about if it's curling. So scrape off any glue you've got left on your card, and then I'm going to cover this up actually using my plastic tablecloth, and then weigh it down with some books and leave it to dry. So there's my completed floor, and I left this to dry over the weekend, that's why it's gone a little bit warped, but we'll be able to flatten that out when we glue it into place. And out of those sheets that I used, I've got about 1.5 left. So that's a good start for my next piece of flooring in the room above. And I've had the wood delivered, so I'll be able to get on to the next piece of flooring today as well. And it'll be good to get both of those done, and then we can start the skirting, coving and door surrounds. So I've already actually tried this into place, and it is a little bit too tight, and that's because I've just gone over one edge by a bit, and there's also about 1 millimetre along the front I want to get rid of. So I'm going to trim that around now. You can actually see there where it's overhanging my template, and it really is only a little tiny bit, and even not all the way along. Bit that I need to trim off along the long edge there, so I'll do that now. So I've given that a trim, and that now fits really nicely into place, and it will do when we actually stick it down flat, and I'll weigh that down with some books and tins and whatever else I can find. So I'm now going to make a start on the template for the first floor. So that's that piece of flooring finished as well, and I'm now going to put that under some heavy books to dry. And at that end there, I did actually overlap quite a bit. I only had probably about 1.5 millimetres to cover of the card, but I didn't want to leave too large a gap, so I will have to trim all of this off, but that's okay. So I'll go and weigh that down, and then I've got a couple of things I want to show you. So the first thing is this gigantic piece of board. And it's actually chipboard, and it came in with a little flat pack unit that we bought. Camera's going out of focus there, but it is about 4 millimetres thick. And whereas before I'd said I'd like to try and salvage this little sort of front step along here, it is actually quite badly damaged. So I'm going to get rid of that, and I'm going to use that piece of chipboard. And Matt has said if I give him the dimensions, he'll go and cut that for me. So I'll do that in a moment. I just want to put the door back on and just really think about how much space I want at the front for those little planters and things that I want to make, and maybe like a little table standing outside with some bits on. And that way I don't have to bother about adding in extra strips of board or anything actually underneath the shop. I can just cut the board so it goes, I think it needs to go back probably a couple of inches. There's like a couple of little wooden stops back there underneath, which it needs to butt up against. So I'll get him to do that in a moment, and we can hopefully fix that during this episode. And that buzzing you can hear in the back is my phone ringing, and I know it's a sales call, so I'm going to ignore it. And then the other thing I want to show you is the skirting and the coving that I'm going to be using for the shop. Now I've ordered in 24 pieces of each, and that's because the coving that I was using in my doll's house is out of stock, and I'm worried it might have been discontinued because I haven't been able to get hold of it for a while. So this is slightly different. It's a little bit more chunky. The one I've sort of started using in my doll's house is quite you know, it's a little bit finer. There's a extra little bit of detail along the bottom, but this is very similar, and just sort of glancing in, you're not going to notice that that's too different. But I've got plenty here, so I'll be able to use it in the shop as well. And I'll probably need about 5 or 6 pieces for the shop. Actually, thinking about the little entrance halls as well, I probably will need 6 pieces for the shop. And let me just show you that shape close up if I can. Have a look from the end there. So you've got like a nice little lip at each side, and it's even. That was quite nice. And then the skirting as well. And again, I'm going to be using this in my doll's house because the one I had been using, again, I haven't been able to get hold of. And if I show you that from the end there, that glue sticking on my fingers, you can see that's just got that nice little sort of detail bit at the top there. And again, I'll probably need about 7 pieces of that. So once the floor has dried, I've got to punch nail holes in both pieces and then think about the colour. And I'm not quite sure yet whether I'm just going to continue this grey theme, or I was thinking about pulling in some of this blue and maybe doing a blue undercoat and then the pale grey or white over the top, which we can then sand back a little bit. I want it to look sort of like weathered board, weathered shipboard or something like that. But I'll have a think about that in the next sort of couple of hours or so, because hopefully I want to get onto that today as well. And then we'll have the skirting and the coving, and that will be painted white to match the ceiling. And then I'll just be cutting some sheet wood to make the door surround, and we'll use a bit of strip on the inside. And we're not doing doors, if you remember, these will just sort of be openings, but it's nice to have a nice door surround. And obviously we'll do that on both sides. And then I want to have a look at those stairs, and they're quite heavily covered in paint. That paint you can see on there is really thick. I don't know if it was maybe a spill, because it just looks like it's dribbled down the whole stairs, or whether the stairs were sort of in place when they were painting the walls, because I think the walls under there were that sort of pale pink colour. So I'm going to get my Dremel out and see if I can actually sand that paint off. And again, I'm going to do the stairs in white. And I'm thinking about doing some sort of rope banister. And again, I've been on Google having a look, and there's some really nice designs on there, but we'll try and keep it simple and perhaps just do a newel post sort of top and bottom, and maybe a post on every other stair. I've got to sort of measure it out and see what we've got there. 6 there, so we'd have to do top and bottom, and then maybe second and fourth or something like that anyway. And then we could do some posts, drill some holes through and do some rope going through. I thought that might look quite nice, and it continues with that sort of beach theme that we're going for. And another little job I've just noticed, I've got to paint along this front again, where I've painted the ceiling and I've got paint along that front edge. So I'll find out that mixed paint and just go along there. And then we're really getting there. I really feel like we're getting somewhere and getting closer to getting on with the furniture and accessories, which I really can't wait to do because I've got so many ideas. So I'm actually going to move on to another project, and I'm going to carry on with our Chesterfield sofa. I really want to get ahead with the tutorials, and I'm looking forward to adding the fabric to that. So that's what I'm going to be doing now until that second piece of flooring has dried, and then we can come back and carry on with all of those things I just talked about. So this piece of flooring has now completely dried. So I'm going to go along and trim off that excess strip wood. And I'm just using my knife along the side of the card there. I say there's only a little slither actually sticking to the card, so I'm being really careful so that it doesn't sort of pull the rest off. And this will be at the back of the shop, so any little nicks out of the wood will be covered with the skirting board. And I'll tidy that up from the other side. Yeah, that piece had started to come off, so I'm going to use my steel rule and just use that to hold it in place, and then go along like that. Snip that off at an angle there so you can't see. And then I've just got a little bit of a split strip wood at the back there, but that will be hidden with the skirting board. And then I just want to take a little tiny bit off each side as well, because when I just tried it into place, it wasn't fitting correctly. Yep, so that is now a nice fit as well. So I now want to make the nail holes in these using my scribe, and then we can actually apply a coat of paint. And I'm sure you would have seen me doing this before, but I'm just basically putting a little nail hole using my scribe into each end of each floor strip. It just looks like little nails, and it's one of those time-consuming tasks, but one which adds a really nice detail and just adds to that realism. Actually, I say it's time-consuming, it's not really. Once you get started, you can fly through it. Okay, so I'm ready to start painting, and I'm going to do an undercoat of this tidal wave, which was one of the colours I showed you in the early episodes when we were just starting out. Really lovely sort of pale blue. And then I'm going to wipe that back using kitchen towel, so it's just really just a wash, and then go over it with this is actually Vancouver. I've just tipped a lot of these sort of pale grey colours into one pot because I'm running out. So there's mostly Vancouver in there, and then a little bit of Ottawa, which is a sort of off-white. And then I'm going to go over the top with that, and we'll see how that looks. So I want to keep that sort of more or less all grey look, because we've got the sort of grey walls and the grey brick at the back there. And then the colour will come from all of the furniture and the accessories. Okay, so let's make a start with the undercoat. And what I've also done is just put a tiny little bit of water in there, just a couple of drops, just to really sort of water it down, as I don't want the blue to be a very prominent colour. I just sort of want a hint of blue coming through. And that really is a nice colour. It's sort of, I don't know, RAF blue almost. So I'm just brushing that on quite thinly. I just want to do a third like that, and then I'm going to bring in some kitchen towel and just wipe that back, so we're sort of exposing the floorboards underneath. So just sort of brushing it on thinly and then taking it back. I'm just looking through the camera there, it doesn't look like I've made much difference, but it has actually taken it back quite nicely and exposed the floorboards. So I'll do the next third. I sort of want to give it that effect of like an old weathered board, if you know what I mean. And we'll apply the top coat in the same way as well. Once this has completely dried, a little bit more on that back bit. And then we should get the effect that I'm after. Use that same piece of kitchen towel, just fold it round and do that last section there. The sun's coming in the window nicely now. So, see what I mean about giving it that sort of almost weathered look? And that will look a lot nicer when we've got the lighter coat on top. And we'll give it a bit of a sand. So I'll get that second coat on, or the coat on the second piece now, rather. So these are both now completely dry, and that only took about 20 minutes. When you wipe it back like that, it dries really quickly. So I'm now going to apply the top coat, and again I've added a little bit of water to the paint there, just again a couple of drops, and I'm going to apply it in exactly the same way. I want to give it more of a coverage this time. And then again, I'm going to wipe that back. I'm just going to give it one sweep over like that this time. I don't want to take too much of it off because we want this to be the sort of predominant colour. You can see there that that's given that sort of whitewashed finish almost. That's one done there. That's still wet. I've just literally just put the brush down, but I really like how that looks and how that blue's coming through more in places obviously where the wood's a little higher, so the kitchen towel has taken a little bit more off. I really like that effect. So I'll do this second one now. Okay, so that's the two of them now done. Really pleased with how they're looking so far. Now time's getting on, it's almost 5 now, so I am going to leave these to dry completely overnight, and then we'll come back and do a little bit of sanding in the morning. But yeah, really pleased with that. Can't wait to get them in place and then make a start on the skirting and coving. So I'll see you in the morning. Good morning. The flooring is now completely dried. It's still a little bit curled up, and that's just because I've used the thinner wood, so as the glue has dried that's just curled, but when we actually stick it into place we'll be able to flatten all of that out. And I'm really pleased with the effect that the 2 layers of paint has created, but I do just want to add a little bit more to that. So I've got here, this is actually a 120 grade sandpaper, so quite strong, but it's very old and very worn, so it's really soft now, and I'm going to use that just to take a little bit more of the paint off, but I'm going to do it really lightly as I don't want it to have too much of an effect, as I really do like these colours that we've created. Now I've got my window open, let's give it a go. And just those 3 sweeps there, I've just taken a little bit of the top coat off and left that sort of brushed colour beneath, and that's the effect I want. I really love that. So that's all I'm going to do, those sort of 3 sweeps along each section like that, and I'm not applying too much pressure. That's all it needs. I think that looks really good. So my battery's just started flashing, so I'll go and change that, and then I'll do the other one. And then it's 9 o'clock now in the morning, so I really want to get these stuck into place so that later on today we can make a start with the skirting, coving and door surrounds. So that's those now done, and I use my soft brush just to go over those and get rid of the sanding dust. And before I put those into place, I just wanted to show you as well that Matt cut that front piece of wood for me. So that's now pushed back as far as it goes. I haven't glued it into place yet because I want to apply sort of like a textured grey paint to make it look like the pavement at the front of the shop. But let me just put the door back into place, and I'll show you how far out that now comes. I'll put that back there like that. And remember that the door is a lot higher than, or will be a bit higher than it is there once the hinges are on, so we'll have a couple of millimetres along the bottom here. But look how far that comes out, so we've got a good sort of, probably a couple of inches, maybe just under 2 inches there. So we can have a little table there with a display on, we can maybe have a couple of little plant pots, some over here as well, to really create some lovely curb appeal. But that looks much neater as well than that old piece of wood. I was just thinking about sort of trying to salvage the original, but it didn't really make sense, so I'm pleased with that. Okay, so I now want to start gluing the ground floor into place. So I'm going to apply the Gorilla Glue directly to the floor and then use my brush to spread that out. And you want to make sure that you get it right into the corners and along the edges, because that's where the floor will curl up if it's going to. So just quickly spreading that out before it starts to go too tacky. So get that into place, and I know I've got a little bit of a gap at the back, so I want to make sure it's nice and straight along this front edge, so that we've always got the neatest edge showing. Down on the front there, and then press it into place. And it's still trying to curl upwards at the moment. And then what I want to do is just grab some kitchen towel to protect the surface, like that. Along the front as well. And then what I've got here is some ceramic tiles. And what I'm going to do is put one in each corner, so it's going right into the corner there. Along this front as well. And that helps to sort of disperse the weight. And then I'm going to put some books in there. I don't think I'll fit another one in the middle, no, but that will still work. So let me grab some heavy books. And that can now be left to dry. And I'll do the same with the top floor. Now with the top floor, I'm not going to put the glue actually above the wires. So I'm just going to very carefully sort of spread it around them. And even though they're protected there with masking tape, I really don't just want to put the glue directly on top of them. So that's the top floor in place as well. And I didn't want to put too many books on there, as I sort of placed those first two heavy ones, that sort of bent a little bit, so I was a bit worried that it might have, given way. But I'm sure it's strong enough really. So whilst they're drying, and they've been drying now for about 20 minutes, but I'll probably leave them for, I don't know, an hour or so, maybe a little bit longer. And then whilst they're drying, I want to have a look at the stairs. And as I said yesterday, they've got this really thick congealed paint on them. And I know that sanding by hand, that would take quite a bit of work. So I've got my Dremel set up, and this time I'm actually using the desk attachment, and it's basically a bit like a sort of desk vise there that you clamp into place, and then it's got this pole with a hook on the end, and you actually hook the heavy part of the Dremel, so the main part, onto the hook, and then you can attach the attachment. I'm sorry, I don't know what these pieces are all called yet, but I will find out. And this piece is just much easier to hold and use, so I'm going to use that. And I've got fitted on the end of there a sanding disc, and I've already had a little go, as you can see. Now you get, or with my kit, I had 5 sanding discs, and I was looking to see if there was one of a different grade, but they all look to be this strong grade. They've got that sort of very sort of heavy, bumpy texture, so they're quite strong sanding discs. But I am going to have a look online and see if I can perhaps get some sort of little woodworking attachment kit to go with the Dremel. So actually, having a look in my case, I haven't got that many attachments, and quite a few of them are for metalwork and things like that. So before I do that vlog about the Dremel, I'll see if I can get a few more attachments that will be more useful for us. So the one thing I did notice when I was having a practice is that this piece really vibrates in your hand. So what I've got here, or what Matt has just lent me, is a pair of mechanics gloves. So it's a really good idea to wear some sort of hand protection whilst you're using this. And that was even with the Dremel set just to number 1, so the lowest setting for sanding. So if you haven't got mechanics gloves, any sort of padded glove that you might have would help, but do sort of try and protect your hands whilst you're doing it. So let me put the camera down and we'll have a go. So I'm not going to be able to do any talking obviously while this is working because it's incredibly loud, but what you don't want to do is press too hard. It really is just about being really light with it. Otherwise what you'll find is that you'll actually start sanding away the stair and you'll probably sort of curve it away, and that's not what we want. So just hold it really, really lightly against the wood and let the tool do the work. You don't have to apply any pressure. And little bits like that, I couldn't quite seem to get it into the crack of the stairs there, so any little bits that are left at the end I'll use a little bit of sandpaper and just do that by hand, or something like a sanding stick or emery board just to get into those corners. But I really just want to take the bulk off with this, so I'm going to put that other glove on just in case I did sort of slip with that sanding disc and go into my other hand. So I'll put a little bit of music over this, but I really just want to show you that you really don't need to apply a lot of pressure. And also I've got the Dremel set to number 1, and that will be completely strong enough. Let me turn it on. That's so loud, but those gloves really do help with the sort of vibrations in your hand. And see, I was hardly applying any pressure at all, and that's sort of sanding along there quite nicely. Couldn't get right into those corners, as I said, but I will do those by hand. So I was really letting it just do its own work, but where I did apply a little bit of pressure, I could feel it going into the stairs. So just then loosen your pressure and carry on. So I'll carry on with these, and then hopefully by the time I finish those we'll be able to have a look and see if the floor has dried into place. So that's both of those now done, and I'm really pleased with the results. I've got some hand sanding to do now, but as I used the Dremel tool I got more comfortable with it and sort of got used to where you apply a little bit more pressure and where not to. And I did go in a couple of places. It's got like a little bit of a gouge there, but I can sand all that flat by hand now and remove along these joins as well. And I didn't do the back of that, and I'll just give that a quick sand and then just paint over it. So I'm just going to try and find a piece of 240 here, a little bit stronger than the 500. There's a piece there. I'll just again go over each stair and get rid of those final bits of paint. And then at those corners you could sort of make a fold with your sandpaper and work that into them. Well, somewhere here I've got an old emery board. And these are quite good at getting into little areas like that. And the other thing I had was this like little sanding strip, but I've used it so many times and I don't know now where to actually get the replacement strip, so that's a shame, because that was quite a nice little tool for working into small little areas like that. As I say, the disc is just completely, or the sanding belt is completely worn now, so it just doesn't really do anything. But emery boards work fine. And you can pick them up quite cheaply as well. So I'll carry on with these now, get them as smooth as I can, and then we can apply a coat of paint. So the stairs are now ready for paint, and I'm going to paint them using the white, which I'll be using for the skirting and coving. Got a little bit left in here, which is going a little bit oily, so I'll just give that a stir. So that's the first coat of paint done on the stairs, and they're definitely going to need 2 or 3 coats to give them a really nice coverage. So I'm going to put these to one side now and leave those to dry, and then I want to move into the shop and make a start on the door surrounds.